Dan, when you were showing the example or the map specifically of the East Boulevard project, I found it interesting that the third and final phase was the middle section. And I was thinking about that until you got to the point that you said there was some mayoral opposition. Was that the reason that the middle section wasn't done first, or are there other challenges?
Yeah, and the answer is no. It wasn't due to anything with the mayor. In fact, like I said, the mayor ended up becoming a real fan of it. We tackled the easiest part first. If we had tried to tackle the middle part, which was the most difficult part, we have two signalized intersections very close to each other. If we had tried to tackle that first, I don't think we would have done phase 1 and phase 2. If we had gone for phase 3 first, we probably wouldn't have been able to do phase 1 and phase 2. Phase 1 we implemented, people loved it, worked out fine. We then did public involvement on phase 2, had I think 90% of the 250 people that came out to the public involvement charrettes say they wanted phase 2 because they were comfortable after seeing phase 1. Then after doing phase 2, got that implemented, we then came out and said, okay, now we're getting ready to resurface the middle part. Now that you've seen phase 1 and phase 2, do you want us to do this? And it was really, that was truly going to be a neighborhood decision. And so using, again, through the public involvement process, had enough buy-in to be able to withstand what's the most challenging part of it.
Did having completed the two ends first actually create some additional problems for the wide middle section to clip?
No, actually, we're blessed in Charlotte to have some really great engineers who, when planners come up with, hey, we'll just end it here and end it here, they're the ones that figure out how to do it. But we were able to handle the middle section without real complications. Part of that has to do with the signals that I just mentioned. We were able to drop lanes at the signals. What was more challenging is now when we set up the middle section, how to process the traffic through those two signals. And we had to make some compromises. If you're going on any of the tours, they'll probably take you down East Boulevard. You'll get a sense for what we had to do there. In a very short, we had a lot of driveways, a lot of business driveways. And so one of the things that we had to do on East Boulevard was make sure we didn't really eliminate driveway access. And so that's where some of the, fortunately, like I said, we have really progressive engineers here that in some other communities, I would say they would have had a hard time doing some of the things that we were able to do.
I was really impressed by the Sugar Creek Greenway. I was on it yesterday, and I noticed how many bridges there are in it, and some redundant bridges. And I was wondering, because I work for DOT as well, and cost is paramount, I was wondering how you guys were able to fund it, whether there were some grant monies that you guys could use between your jurisdictions of economic development and planning and transportation, how that was achieved.
I wasn't super involved in the bridge discussion, but I know that we used tax increment financing for this particular project. We were partnering with the developer to, actually, we took down a bridge that was ready to be replaced, that was going to need to be replaced. We moved that bridge over, and I forget how many feet, but I'm going to guess somewhere in the 400 to 500 feet range. That maximized the developable area for the developer and enabled, I think they contributed some to the bridge redevelopment, we did, and also Parks and Rec needed to have a bridge design where they could get the trail underneath the bridge. So if I recall correctly, there were 3 partners that came into play in building that bridge. Also, along the way, I remember that some of the conversation came up was, do we need to replace a bridge? Well, we did the traffic analysis saying if you don't replace that bridge, we're going to have traffic backups that are significant. So sometimes traffic congestion can be your friend because we were able to get better connectivity with that project because there would have been significant traffic implications. Does that answer your question? Good. Way in the back, how about?
When you're looking at creating a sense of place and increasing value in the long term, have you looked at what public health might call populations at risk, how the elderly, new immigrants, the poor are going to find a sense of place within increasing home value?
I won't say that we've done it maybe directly, but I think we've done it indirectly as we look at and try to understand what new census figures are, acknowledging sometimes as we're doing any kind of effort, whether it be planning or an economic development effort, what the population is growing to be in a certain area. I think we really do try to acknowledge that different cultures and different populations have different needs. But sometimes it's very difficult because we can maybe see 5 years out, but we can't know for a specific area what's going to happen 20, 30 years out. So I think we really end up kind of compromising and trying to generally meet a broad range of needs and expectations, and maybe not getting as specified for those individual groups. No.
I would just add on the affordable housing front, we do try to look at this very comprehensively and not locate affordable housing just where the land is inexpensive. Just because the capital to build it is less doesn't mean the overall affordability works for the people in the building. So we want to make sure that we're located near transit, that we're near employment centers, education, schools, all of those things come into consideration, but we're no different than your areas. As soon as you get into a well-populated, near schools, near jobs, somebody says, I don't want them near me. So it is a tough battle, project by project by project, but we do try to be holistic in our approach to that.
I was impressed with your street diet program. Have you ever tried it where it basically requires parking diets? I'm thinking of sort of low-rise retail streets where you would have a cross-section with 2 travel lanes and then 2 full-time parking bays, if you will, on either side. So you need to remove one side of parking to find space for bikes or whatever, but retail believes that's death to them. Have you had that experience, and if so, how did you go about dealing with it?
I can't think of any projects that we have done where we have eliminated parking to get bike facilities. We have been really creative in using the space to the best of our ability to benefit all users. And so in some of the earlier sessions, you've probably heard people talk about 10-foot travel lanes, and we certainly do lots of 10-foot travel lanes. We've done the sharrows where we weren't able to get full bike lanes next to parking. We've done a lot of shadow parking where times of the day you're allowed to park on the street, other times of the day during absolute peak times perhaps you might not be able to. But I don't think, I'm not aware of any place that we have actually taken off on-street parking to put in bike facilities. Now, that doesn't mean we're not going to. I can think of at least one project that we are mulling over that will require elimination of some on-street parking in order to perhaps implement a pretty significant bike facility in the center city area. So we haven't experienced that yet, but we have a lot of 4-lane roads that we can't quite road diet them, but during peak times there may be ways to utilize the lanes differently. So for example, we have 4-lane undivided roadways. We're beginning to think about during off-peak times, could we get down to 2 lanes, one in each direction, and utilize the curb lane for something else, whether it be parking, whether it be bikeways, something that may not be there all the time, but would be there a portion of the day.
That's an interesting comment about parking and retailers, and what we have found in several different neighborhoods in Charlotte, the Noda neighborhood, South End near Dilworth, and now a new growing area, West Trade Street, Beatties Ford Road corridor, is that we're investigating whether or not we should introduce municipal parking decks somewhere in the mix, because we want pedestrian environments. We want these small boutique restaurants and shops and art galleries to be successful, but you can't find a place to park. And we don't want to push the parking into the neighborhoods because that creates problems. So we're studying now whether or not we ought to provide parking structures and sort of take that off the table as a concern for these small businesses as just municipal infrastructure.
Let me just add just a little bit more to that. We did on the Commonwealth project in Plaza Central, we were going from where it was the pull-in parking and the wide street without the curb. We did go from a all private parking, and I think we looked at losing maybe 5 spaces. And you would have thought for those businesses that the world was coming to an end. So we really, I think, are having a challenge with that kind of concept of in these tight areas where we do have on-street parking, losing any parking because it is so dear to those businesses out there. We managed to do it, and we're actually converting from what would be individual private parking with very few spaces to that all being public parking on Commonwealth Avenue, but people still see that as a loss. Now, maybe they had access to 3 spaces before and now they have 30, but yet it's not their 3 and they can't guarantee.
I know there was a question in the back, I think you, ma'am. Thank you. Yes.
Yeah. We have a question as far as road diets. We have a couple of roads in the city of Lynchburg, but they work on an allocation where they receive a portion of their state funding based on car miles traveled. So we almost work with a disincentive to do road diets. And so, it makes it hard to sell, honestly, to your political to say, well, these are some great opportunities, but we're going to lose some money. So is that not an equation that North Carolina has to deal with, or is it something you've been able to overcome regardless?
Yeah, actually, one of my first questions for you back would be, what makes you think you're going to have less vehicle miles of travel just because you road diet a roadway? In our experience is we actually have maintained the same traffic volumes, and in some cases the volumes have actually gone up after the road diet. And I think I have some national examples from around the country, and you'll see that. One of the first questions we get when we propose or throw the concept of a road diet on the table, well, you have 20,000 cars a day, where's half the traffic going to go if you go from 4 lanes to 2 lanes? And our answer, based off our experiences and other experiences around the country, is that they're going to stay right there. You're going to see the volumes generally stay the same, as long as you can still move the traffic. And again, a road diet isn't the answer in every case, but where it is a opportunity, you're going to move the same amount of traffic. You're just going to move it at slightly slower speeds. And many good engineers will tell you, actually, if you can bring speeds down, you can actually move more traffic at the same time. Some states I know and have you get reimbursed based off the number of lane miles you have. Okay, so it's not vehicle miles travel, it's lane miles of travel. I might try the bike lanes count as lanes and say, in fact, instead of having 4 travel lanes, we now have 5 travel lanes.
We've tried that, and it doesn't work. I brought it up to the Commonwealth Transportation Board and told them it was a disincentive versus an incentive to put in, just additional bike facilities on the streets if we lose through travel lanes, reducing our highway maintenance payments. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so.
Oh, that's interesting. Well, I'm sure others have sort of faced that same issue. The roads that I was talking about, those are roads that we control. And I haven't had anyone say that we're going to get reimbursed differently on them. So maybe we can talk after this session a little bit more. In the back?
This feeds into the question you just answered. And you were saying that when you looks good, huh? Anyway, on the case of Selwyn, that the traffic actually increased. And do you know what to attribute that to?
It's hard to tell. Traffic volumes do fluctuate from time to time, and the difference is about 1,000 vehicles per day. So it went from about 20,000 vehicles per day to 21,000. That's not a significant difference, and next year it could be 19,000. There has been redevelopment along the corridor. There's a location along the Selwyn corridor that's now the place to be, and I'm not going to attribute it all to the road diet. It was sort of in the works anyways, but I think the road diet has helped create a more vibrant place, going back to you can actually sit outside and sit by the water fountain and, eat your ice cream, and the yogurt shops are there, and the little grocery store went in there. And so there's more development that's occurred along Selwyn. So, could that be the 1,000-car difference? Yeah, it probably could. It's hard to pinpoint it exactly. I think it's something that, we monitor year in, year out, and we'll see how things fluctuate. We do know that when the economy turned, as it did across the country, generally traffic volumes in Charlotte went down, ironically on our road diet, so they've gone up. Now, again, I can't say that there's anything to that yet, but we'll keep monitoring it, and I think it's important, and because one of the biggest challenges with road diets is you have to convince the business owners they're not going to them, if it goes from 20,000 to 10,000, that to them would be something that they'd be very fearful about. So you have to kind of get them past that hump and show that's just not what's happened. And in fact, in many cases, it's changed. It's actually increased the volume, or at least kept it the same. Yes, sir.
Has Charlotte DOT adopted any place in your policies and standards where you would have a policy on road diets, where it's been codified in one area?
We are actually beginning to work on that a little bit, and part of the reason I mentioned that so many neighborhoods are now saying we want one of those, we're spending a lot of staff time analyzing them, because we won't do it unless we know it's going to work. And so we do a lot of traffic analysis on it, and that's very labor intensive. So we're moving more towards a policy where we can sort of carve out and say, yeah, this one we just don't even think passes the good faith test. And getting there is going to take us a little time, but we're working towards that. Fortunately, we've had a city and departments that support it, and the head of our department is a big fan of road diets, and so we've been able to just sort of do them, and it's almost like they've taken on a life of their own. But we are going to have to codify a little bit just so we can explain to neighborhoods why we're having to say no in some cases. And we have one neighborhood that's very upset with us that we aren't able to implement a road diet because we just don't think it'll work.